Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We're going to take another look here at this little free fall from Bitcoin once more, as per usual, losing its local high here. Didn't really hold as strong support for very long. We're seeing high volume selling pressure at this point, so it's generally best to wait until the bottom is in before you consider taking a trade. And I know it's like, wait a minute, how do I know when the bottom's in? Well, we're going to talk about ways to identify that. We're also going to touch on some comparative analysis between some altcoins, obviously some back-end liquidation data too, and some pretty obvious areas here of liquidation that are getting hit right now. So we're going to double check that and much more. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end data here, let's go ahead and double check a few important things. First things first, hit the like button, maybe even comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are here with Bitcoin. Do you think the bottom's in at 100,000 or you really think we're going to continue lower? It's an interesting situation nonetheless. When we look at liquidation delta though, there's still more selling pressure than buying pressure. The delta's quite high to the downside. So we got to respect the fact that the trend is still down, right? We've got two descending trend lines we're going to talk about here today. Furthermore too, when we look at liquidation, this area here, which was basically, I refreshed this about 30 minutes ago, as you can see, all that liquidation, the downside is all swept now. Now we got a bunch of shorts at 101K that the price action is going to push right back up towards to go ahead and sweep those late shorts. So all the more reason why you want to be very careful and watch your trades pretty close, because liquidation in both directions has been getting hit pretty hard lately. So it's just kind of one of those things where you can't just, hold a short to the ground floor or hold a long to the moon. It's a very difficult situation. Obviously, some people are probably in at 116,000 on a short thinking they're the bee's knees right now. But the truth is that's still high risk to hold that for too long because you're going to get eaten up on fees. 7 days here, we can see the last 7 days liquidation. It's pretty even between the lower and upper side here. Nothing super outrageous there. And the same thing with the larger time frames. Pretty much all liquidation has been hit here overall. Cool. So what that basically just tells us is that market makers are doing their job. They're really just sweeping both directions. Keep in mind, traditional markets, I noticed like big tech, they're all pulling back here today. So there's a good chance there's a correlation there. We also have like crazy stuff in the world going on too. So be very mindful. The market's in a weird place. We look at liquidations though, like we got what is that? That's 7-to-1 ratio, almost 8-to-1 ratio for Bitcoin for longs getting liquidated versus shorts. ETH, not so much. That shows that ETH is showing a pretty good strength here, if you will, because there's less longs getting liquidated as there are shorts. So that kind of implies sustainability in the current price range, which increases the odds of the price recovering for this coin or hitting that bottoming state. All right. You could argue the same thing with Solana too. It's only a 3-to-1 ratio. So we're starting to see less liquidation on altcoins, which is generally a favorable sign in most cases, because that does imply, not to say that altcoin season's on track by any stretch, but it does tell us here that, our altcoin market cap isn't dumping. Yes, it's still low, but it's not pulling back super hard. Or you could also argue that there's just, nobody's left nobody really wants to buy anymore, so there's less liquidation. There's a lot of little things there, of course, that could be factoring in, but for the most part right now, it's inherently more risky to try to consider a long position at this exact moment, no matter how you look at it. Now, I did send out some updates to my community here for like areas of consideration. I was looking for a Bitcoin short at 105.5, between that range, in that range of 105.5 and 107.5. We hit 104.6, I think it was. So we missed all these short opportunities here, of course, because the price never continued that high on that continuation. And now, we're kind of in that range of 100 to 102,000 for Bitcoin. So this is a desirable range for me to consider a long, partially because of macro structures, but also the overall sentiment that we are moderately overextended to the downside, and there's a solid chance that we do see recovery there. ETH missed its 33.50 by a long shot, and 158 for Solana is also a thing in the past. Keep in mind, these are not trade signals. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up to my community that these are areas I'm considering, and we always want to reevaluate Bitcoin before entry. So it's basically what we're doing now, right? So you got just a reminder to do your due diligence before you take a trade, because had I just blindly taken those trades, we'd be in the red right now, right? That's why you don't just take trades without evaluating Bitcoin first. So let's take a look here. Let's do our due diligence and double check the backend data here. This is the last 7 days worth of open interest for Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and refresh. We can kind of see here. We zoom in. Open interest is at 101.3 and roughly 99.2. So we kind of got this range between 99 and 101,000. Average entry roughly 100,000 even, for that consideration for a solid support range below the price or at the current price range. So we're kind of in that support range, for lack of better terms. It's also a macro support. 100,000 is an even round number. There's a good chance we do see a pivot and a bounce from here. But once more, it's very difficult to say. Price is precipitating lower very fast right now. So it is inherently more risky to consider along. But obviously, if you watch it close and tighter margins, maybe a different story. But we can see liquidation delta is spiking now down to about 10 billion in shorts. when we look at the liquidation here on the left-hand side, those last 7 days worth of liquidation, we kind of zoom in a little bit. There's some left here, a good chunk between 98 and 96. So I'd say that's probably our short-term worst-case scenario for us, just based on the simple fact that, that's our local bottom there, that 98.7 range here, okay? That's kind of where we're at there on the overall sense. Now, when we look at the current structure here, Bitcoin did lose, and this is the hourly time frame, by the way. Bitcoin did lose its tentative support here. Okay, so just kind of give you some perspective how it's supposed to work. In most cases, for a bullish continuation to be effective or to verify you're in a short-term continuation higher, this local high here, this guy right here, should have bounced. We should have seen the price bounce from there. Instead, you saw some consolidation for an hour or two, and then it dumped. Right, basically implying we lost support. That does also reiterate and reaffirm the fact that we come back up, that could be a new resistance for us, right? So it's potential. Anyways, that's how support and resistance ranges hold. Once more, this isn't just a magical level here. It's basically just an area that we saw a lot of confluence there, where the price action took about 9 hours of consistent reattempts to break that level. Once it did, continued higher. Now it should have held, but it didn't. Okay, that's kind of what we try to look for bullish backtests, which so far haven't happened yet. Let's look at the 4-hour time frame and just double check a few things. Once more, we're still in this short-term descending trend, our macro descending trend also. So we're a double bearish, if you will, in a lot of ways, just based on confirming factors not being present. So if you take along with Bitcoin right now, outside of just this key level support of 100,000, 100.5K, there's a solid chance that the price action will continue to be suppressed and pull back, right? We just kind of got to be mindful of that. However, we can see the 4 hours reflecting an overextension, hitting that RSI at 30, which is generally a good place to see a bounce. But MACD is starting to diverge. If this oscillator here continues to pick up momentum, then we're going to be in pretty rough shape, right? So we're going to see here, as the day progresses, does 101,000 hold? Does 100K range between 100 and 101K hold, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. We need to see that happen before you can have more confidence in taking along. Not to say that you couldn't still take along now, because it's inherently, while it's more inherently riskier, there's also a decent propensity we don't go much lower based on 100,000 being that macro psychological support level. A lot of people have buy orders at 100,000. We could see a wick down to 99, 98K to sweep that liquidation. But generally speaking, that's where we're at. And once more, the daily time frame is not bullish by any stretch. So try not to convince yourself that we're in a good, good structure. But the truth is, we have yet to break this previous low and the current low cycle here. It's not even a cycle. Sorry, it's the wrong word. Basically, that lower support range of 101 to 100,000. Okay, and we've seen multiple attempts to break it with nothing having happened yet. So to me, that seems like a good consideration for a tight long, just based on the simple fact that it's a desirable area to consider. But once more, the odds are stacked against you. If you do take a long, make sure you watch it close and be kind of careful there. Okay, but if we can close above 100.5K today, our local low, then I think we're in good shape to see the price recover here, at least on the short term, to break our short-term descending trend. Then we want to pay attention to that other macro structured descending trend line there, where we've seen essentially lower highs and lower lows on the larger time frames. For right now, we're tentatively haven't established lower lows yet on this short-term continuation here. So until we do, we want to presume that this will hold, right? That's kind of the concept. So it's an interesting one right now, but those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. Let's go ahead and take a look at some altcoins next. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, let's take a look at some altcoins, kind of see what's going on. We'll just do a quick comparative analysis for each coin as well versus Bitcoin. It's probably going to be pretty uneventful, but what I mean by that is just that the altcoins are pulling back just as well as Bitcoin is. So we want to identify each of their key level supports and see if it's worth considering a long or a short here. But when we look at the overall situation here, it's not good news when you have to zoom out just to be able to see the candle wicks. All right, so it's not awesome. Anyways, the left-hand side is Bitcoin, right-hand side is Ethereum, and starting off with ETH, we can see that it's pulling back pretty synonymous with Bitcoin. Bitcoin had a larger correction from 101.7 to 100.5, where ETH pulled back from 3,300 to 3,250. So while this is still a correction nonetheless, it's not as monumental or as high or as strong as some other altcoins out there. So I guess that shows some strength in Ethereum, but once more, ETH has less liquidation to the downside, implying that there's either less longs or there's more strength in this coin. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can identify that and double check a couple things here. First of all, backend data as follows. Let's go ahead and get some refresh. We're looking at the last 7 days of open interest, and we kind of got to zoom in here a little bit, but the open interest ranges are about 3,200, 3,270, and 3,300. Right, so it's kind of, we're starting to see a lot more open interest piling up below the price. So that kind of reinforces some support in the range here. So from 3,200 to 3,300, we have a decent range of support with propensity for further upside, or just the fact of the matter is the price will gravitate towards those levels, which it already has, and it could very well continue to progress upwards from here. Now, again, I'm not trying to be bullish in a bearish situation. I want to reiterate and reaffirm Bitcoin's bearish right now. It's still in a descending trend. There's a lot of road to traverse, or continue to progress higher before we can break any type of continuation and even say that Bitcoin's back on track. All that said, though, outliers can exist, and when you have areas of open interest below the price, even in the light of all this liquidation, there's a solid chance that the price does recover, at least for the short term. And we want to identify those short-term continuations, because you don't want to try to take a long to 4,000 for Ethereum, but you should be mindful that it's going to bounce at some point, and we're going to try to identify that. So easy way to understand it, 3,200 is the last little area of liquidation. So that should be the local bottom for us, just based on liquidation alone. But there's no doubt that liquidation delta is almost at about 18 billion, and that's quite a lot, right? That's a significant amount of selling pressure. So still inherently more risky to consider along at this price point. But let's see here. Let's double check. So the hourly, first of all, we kind of side by side of this with Bitcoin, and just to clarify, there's really nothing substantial here. In fact, if you zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see this current progression. Bitcoin's falling a lot harder than ETH is as far as its local bottom, right? Bitcoin's local bottom is 99, and it's at 100.5, where the local bottom is 3,100 for ETH, and we're at 3,250. While it may not seem like a lot, it's still not quite as strong of a pullback as Bitcoin. Okay, so it does show some strength in altcoins, which is beneficial, at least this altcoin specifically. That being said, we look at the 4-hour time frame, we're still going to see a lot of bearish divergences, but once more, we're getting closer to this level of 30 on the RSI. With money flow index being above the RSI, that's typically a favorable sign, kind of implying that's a good value and people are going to want to buy it, but also that money is flowing in just as well as it's flowing out. Keep in mind, with the MFI increasing, it's also factoring in the last 14 candles, which is this big significant selling candle. So it does imply that, while yes, we are seeing the price action pulling back, this local bottom should hold based on this significantly strong hammer up doji type of candle. Again, that's this high volume candle. So all that being said, there's a lot of strength in this range here. That kind of just reinforces and reiterates the fact that there's a good chance that we bounce soon. Now, is that bounce going to be monumental and super strong and super hard to the upside? Probably not. I would say 3,400 probably be the local high. At least that'd be a solid consideration for a take profit target, partially because that was a previous open interest range, but also a macro support level that so far isn't holding on the larger time frames. So if we look at the daily time frame, we can recognize here that the previous low, which once more, this isn't solid by any stretch, 3,400 is that round number, probably the likely next high for us if we were to continue to progress in this lower low, lower high pattern on this slightly lower time frame. So hypothetically, price comes up here and continues to progress lower, right? So if you were to take a long between now and then, consider securing profits at 3,400 or under that, just because you don't want to be super greedy in this market, because the odds of getting up to like 4,000 or even 3,700 right now is pretty low. It all depends on how Bitcoin is going to perform here moving forward. So once more, with that crazy, ridiculous situation here where we just kind of got to pump the brakes for a moment, think about what you do and just be careful with it. All right. So I'll post our playout chart on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord, of course, with an update here. But for right now, at this point, that's kind of what we're looking at for Ethereum. Moving on to Solana, this one's probably going to be pretty similar in a lot of ways. I mean, most of the price action for these altcoins are synonymous to the downside, right? It's just how far down are they going? What are those key levels? So there's no real need to dive into too much with that comparative analysis. When we look at Solana, though, we want to recognize that open interest is, let's actually just get a little refresh here, those last 7 days, 160, 150, 160 to 165 is kind of that local area there. That does imply that's somewhat of a resistance for us because we've had difficulty crossing that level. But it also tells us that we're building support in the 150s to 160s. All that said, though, liquidation delta is still super high to the downside, basically suggesting that a long position is still considered to be higher risk. If we look at the last 7 days here, we can recognize too that actually we're going to look at the last 3 days rather. Most of 7-day liquidation has been swept, and we can see 150 to 155 is kind of that last lower area of liquidation for Solana. So if Bitcoin has one more leg down to 100 or 99,000, I would say 150 seems like a practical consideration for long, just based on liquidation and local lows. Now we take a look here at Solana on the 4-hour time frame. Once again, these charts do need to be updated here, just based on the simple fact that the prices continue to run. But based on yesterday's analysis here, we could see that 158 to 159 is kind of that macro support level for us, and secondary to that is 175. I'm rounding down a little bit, but 175 is kind of the area. So that's the area I was hoping we'd see the price recover to, so we could short that bad boy. Between now and then, hypothetically, if you take a long, you want to consider securing profits between now and then, because that is a previous bottom that was tested multiple times, right? That's the reason why you want to kind of consider a short there, because you're likely to see a bearish back test in most cases, right? Obviously, the descending trend could be broken, but that's oftentimes how market makers will trick you into a false sense of confidence, because you break an SMA and they're like, oh, cool, everyone's going long now. Let's go ahead and just cut them out. Cut them off at the knees, right? So 175 is still a consideration for a short in my mind. But between now and then, what does that mean for us? Well, if you were to take a long, that implies that that should be your take profit target range, or at least the high side of that range, okay? So that's kind of how I usually like to analyze the charts. I like to look for support and resistance zones, and then kind of identify those and kind of work within those margins, because I'm not sure if we're going to be ranging or not, but if Bitcoin ranges from 100 to 105K, or just say 100 to 110K, then we're going to see similar ranges from these altcoins, with a few exceptions and outliers that are continuing higher. That said, though, 4-hour time frame, not much to really note here. Very similar price action. We have more money flow index above the RSI, generally a positive sign, and not a great sign because this is a falling knife effect, but it's still a good sign nonetheless. Certainly not promoting a bullish type of convergence by any stretch. But we haven't broken this descending trend line until we break soundly below 155 or close below that. We can presume the price will hold this range and continue higher, and we'll probably be ranging between 155 and 165. But just keep in mind, there is some liquidation down here at this lower range of 150, so that could be the next candle wick down if Bitcoin has another panic attack. All right, so that's kind of my thoughts there on Solana. Oh, before we go too, I want to remind you, between now and November 22nd is still this available option here for Bitunix. Phenomenal exchange, excellent reward bonus here, good $700 USDT just for depositing some funds, and a nice reward bonus as well based on volume for my I wouldn't say my higher leverage traders, but my higher margin traders. Okay, so that's good stuff, easy money there if you want to consider that. Either way, we'll go and take a look here at SUI next. All right, so SUI, what do we got here? This coin is looking pretty abysmal here, for lack of better terms. Pretty much the whole market is consistent with the market. So no shade on SUI or XRP when we get there, of course, because I'm sure it'll look like crap too. But the concept here remains the same, is that we are seeing a lot of resistance now building at that 2 to 205 range. That was supposed to work as a support, but we can see a pretty obvious reversal there at the $2 mark. So we were able to squeeze some profit out of that here recently on just like one of our exchanges. It was a nice little profit from what I think we averaged in the 190s to 205, but you literally cannot take these kind of trades for very long if you're going to consider long positions. Shorts are a better consideration overall, but almost every single bearish backtest that I've been waiting for hasn't been happening. So that's why we've been taking tighter longs at key level supports versus shorting those resistances, because the resistances are not really being retested. So it's kind of a bummer. Oftentimes when they are retested, I'm sleeping through it too. So it's kind of terrible. It seems to be like all these wonderful price action movements occur while I'm sleeping, which is generally the Asian market hours. So we're seeing the most volatility there. All that being said, liquidation delta is still quite high, back down to about 300 million for this coin. And let's go ahead and zoom in here just for the last 3-day time frame, get some local liquidation levels for SUI. There's a small chunk. It's not super substantial, but 185 to 180. That could be the next consideration for this coin. All right, and that's basically the local low. So for lack of better terms, 185 hitting that local bottom, that may be a good consideration for long, just based on the simple fact that it's an overextended, we're in an overextended state there, and it's often or common for previous lows to be retested, and when they are, for the price to initially bounce the first time. So don't put too much emphasis onto that though. All that said though, we're still in a descending trend line on the short term. I don't have my macro descending trend line up here, but it's roughly the same. Okay, so there's nothing super substantial here. We're still in a macro descending trend. Okay, so the overall sentiment here for SUI is not phenomenal. Unlike these other coins we've already covered, the money flow index is quite low, therefore implying that we have not enough buying pressure to suggest the price will recover here. So I would like to ixnay on my Aument K and basically say that SUI is probably not going to bounce quite as good as we'd like it to. Keep in mind macro support here at 193. We do have a lot of support here so far where people are interested in buying this range based on previous lows. But is that really a reason to take a trade? Not really. I would avoid SUI for the moment. This just doesn't feel right. Something is off with this coin. And that's just kind of how it is. This coin is extremely unique in almost every single way. It pumps super hard sometimes and it dumps really hard other times. It's a hard coin to trade. So just, unless we have full confluence with this coin, probably not worth it. I'd say 185 is a better case scenario, but that's probably not even going to happen. Or sorry, if that does happen, I'd be very concerned with taking along because that just seems like it's the edge of a cliff. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, looking at the daily time frame for XRP. Before we do that, let's jump into the backend data. Last 7 days of XRP here. It's kind of all over the place. This coin always has open interest ranges kind of spread out, but the heaviest concentration is 215, upwards of 227. So there's still that little range of 215 to 225 is a rough estimate. We talked about that recently. Good news is this coin doesn't have a significant amount of liquidation short delta. While it is pulling back, yes, and we had some slightly bullish momentum here recently, coin looks very good in the overall sense compared to most other coins. However, we are shifting momentum that can imply further downside. So I'd be very careful. This coin is heavily manipulated too as well. Even if it is your favorite coin, you got to recognize that a lot of idiots trade this coin. Sorry, not the people. Well, I'm sure there's idiots that trade all coins, right? But it's the influencers and the people that talk about this coin going to $50, $100 in the next couple of weeks or something. Trust me, these people are outrageous and they're literally making money off of idiots. So unfortunately that all happens, but why I mention that is because this coin it's going to move faster in different directions. Specifically the downside, it's been moving down a lot faster than other coins. While this is pretty natural and normal, we want to be mindful of that. Okay, so just kind of friendly advice, be very careful when you do trade this coin. It's kind of more of an emotional coin based on the emotional traders that are trading it, right? They're trading off of that sentiment that they're constantly being fed on the social media. All that said though, 220, we can see here, 220 to 215 is kind of one of those areas of liquidation. So that's synonymous in a lot of ways with our open interest range. So hypothetically 215, that seems like a decent area to consider along. Now, the thing I want to clarify on this coin is that it is looking better than most other coins. While it's down 5% a day versus 2.5 for Bitcoin, that's roughly a 2x of Bitcoin on the downside. It has been 2xing to the upside as well. So that's where that emotional connection with people trying to buy these dips here consistently, that can be very beneficial in a lot of ways, right? Because they're being told to buy from XYC influencer, and then the price pumps, and then of course the whales are going to suppress the price and pull it back down. That's just kind of the natural way of things. So if you understand that, it's very helpful because it does tell us that, hey, this coin can do pretty well on its own in most cases. As we saw here recently, this is a much better pump than most other coins. However, it hit 2 nines on TD sequential, inevitably had like an overextension here for double top and then pulled back. I wouldn't say that's easy to predict, but that's kind of standard trading 101 right there, where we had these overextended states. This, of course, keep in mind, was late at night, sometime that I wasn't able to identify it, but the concept here is that You want to be careful trading this coin in a lot of ways. I don't know how else I can reiterate that. I think I've said it probably 15 different times, so I'll go ahead and move on. Sidebar there, 4-hour time frame. I want to kind of clarify this. We're still in a descending trend. Money flow index is slightly higher than the RSI, and RSI isn't pulling back quite as strong as other coins. So once again, while we're still in a pullback here, the likelihood of a reversal or a pivot and a bounce from this range is quite high for this coin. So me personally, if Bitcoin can hold that 101K range today, then I think we're probably more likely to see XRP recover quicker than most. But once more, it can be difficult to identify these kind of trends based on just the Bitcoin's bottom not being in, right? Daily time frame, I want to specify a couple of things here. First of all, macro resistance 270, 275. That's not super relevant yet, but it will be eventually. If we zoom out to just say the macro structure, ever since we've been at 175 to the $3 range, we're looking at 240 as that macro amount of volume. What that basically tells us is that that's the resistance range for us. Okay, so 240 is that upper resistance here for us. So if the price were to progress higher, be very careful just taking along right into that range. There's a good chance that we reject out at 240 initially, which is synonymous in a lot of ways with that open interest we've already identified, right? So it's kind of the concept there. There's also some benefits here, I guess you could say, or just confluence rather, with 245 to 238 with the upper ranges of those Fibonacci retracements. So there's definitely some good stuff there. So between now and 240, I would say the price is more likely to go higher. Once more, that does require Bitcoin to not lose 100,000. If we lose 100,000 for Bitcoin, XRP will probably continue to free fall. Just know this fair value gap here at 218 is likely to get filled here soon. So I would say waiting for one more leg down would probably be the safer play to hit that 215, that local bottom. Right, that's that perfect little place there. The likelihood of a pivot and a bounce from there, because we are fairly well overextended, but I wouldn't be surprised we continue a bit lower. Okay, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Sorry for the sidebar here today. I know I kind of went in circles there, but hopefully it makes sense. And I say that and I kind of reiterate that because we have a lot of XRP traders coming onto our community here. And a lot of them have just gotten absolutely railed by these other promoters. And it's unfortunate, it frustrates me. So that's why I think I get a little passionate about it. So I don't really dislike this coin. I just think sometimes the community itself, more so from an influencer perspective, they're the ridiculous idiots here, not necessarily the traders. But honestly, if you fall for that, you're probably an idiot too. So I don't know. Either way, no offense. I hope that makes sense to you. Thanks again for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your day. See you in the next one. Take care.